I've got 5 o'clock. Is Lydia is Councilmember Safados going to join us? On her way in a car or on her way in the building? Oh, okay. All right, thank you very much. All right. Well, good evening. I will call to order the special meeting of the Federal Way City Council for April 1st, and that's no joke, for 2025. Please rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. All right, welcome. We have a study session. Oh, one second. My chair wants to get away from me. It's running away. All right. So, what's with me and the jokes? All right, we'll leave the dad jokes at home. We've got a study session for 2% of the arts for the Joint Operations and Maintenance Facility. We'll have a staff presentation by E.J. Walsh, our Public Works Director.
And I'm assuming you want to start, not wait for Councilmember Safados.
Yes, of course. Well, we'll start without her for now. She's on her way, and Councilmember Tran is attempting to join remotely, but is unable to, so he'll be excused for this meeting, and we'll repeat that at the next meeting too. He's excused.
Get rid of this so we can all see each other and go from there. So good evening, Mayor, members of Council, Council President. As the Mayor said, E.J. Walsh, Public Works Director. We are here tonight to have a study session on art in public places, also known as 2% for the Arts. You did receive a detailed memo in your packet, in your council packet tonight that has the same content as what I'm going to go over. For this presentation, we're going to go through art in public places broadly and then focus on capital path city projects, and then lastly, how that relates to the operations and maintenance facility. So, if this advances for me, there it goes. So as background, art in public places is codified in Federal Way Revised Code Chapter 4.15. In summary, there's several different components to it. It requires that art be incorporated into certain capital projects, and it requires compliance with other project and bond requirements, and we're going to come back to that one. It requires that the art be publicly accessible, and it requires establishes a minimum of 2% of qualifying capital improvement project costs be used for public art, with certain exceptions. So we're going to go at a high level. That's what this presentation is going to focus on, and we're going to come back through each one of these points in the next couple of slides. So as background on Chapter 4.15 within code, the code construction itself is effectively in three separate groups. The first is the funding and calculation of the cost itself. The second covers the use of the funds, and then the third section covers the responsibilities of the Arts Commission and their role in this. This code was adopted, as I think was mentioned at the last meeting, by an ordinance in 1994. Since that time, it was amended, the definition section was amended once, which did not have any substantive revisions to it. And then it was recodified, so the chapter numbers, as part of the citywide effort in 2001 to update all the codes and get them into one book, which is where the revised and Federal Way Revised Code comes from. So all of the section numbers do not match the original ordinance, but the content, the words themselves are the same. So the funding and calculation cost, or that first section of the bullet, it requires 2% of the total project cost to be used for art in public places. Within that, it also requires, in the next bullet down, that requires expenditure on the project in which funds are generated. So in the case of purpose tonight, the operations and maintenance yard. It also requires, and the bold is in addition to what's in code, as far as it's not actually bold in code, but the words are the same. It requires compliance with the general obligation bond proceeds. That becomes very important, and we're going to come back to that. But in short, the bond documents themselves are a contract. They're between us and the lender. So the bank that our bond is actually through has requirements in the bond documents themselves that came through our bond council and were approved, that all funds associated with this project have to be spent on this property. We cannot supplant money out of the bond documents or the bond proceeds to spend on a different project off-site. It also requires that all funding be managed within the project and program fund. So there is no way to transfer money and still be compliant with the bond requirements from our bond agency. Funds can be combined with gifts, donations, or grants. At this point, I'm sorry to say we have not received any gifts or grants or donations towards art at the maintenance yard, but if we were, this would be additive. It also outlines what is included and excluded within the calculation of cost. So it is based on, and very explicitly, the awarded contract value. So that is the general contract for construction. So that it takes out things like property costs, it takes out things like demolition, it takes out things like equipment. So the use of funds, kind of that second bullet point. 4.15.050 subsection 1 is the first section that talks about the use of funds. They are specific to the selection, acquisition, and installation or display of the original works of visual art and which may be incorporated in the project or on or about the project. As we just mentioned, they still have to be compliant with the bond documents, so it still has to be used on this site. And then the second half of that paragraph is upon approval of City Council. Now, and to be very clear, there was no approval of City Council because of the first part of this conversation. We cannot use them on a different facility. However, code does allow, if council were to approve, these funds could be used to fund art on a different property. That would fly in the face of the bond documents. So obviously we have to fall under the first half of this section. We cannot transfer them. So needless to say, staff did not request council to approve allocating funds to a different property because that would be non-compliant with the bond documents. It does allow repair and maintenance of public art acquired for 2% for the arts funds. There is no art fund projects on this property, and again, with the bond documents, that would be non-compliant. So this section is effectively not applicable. It does allow for other project-specific expenses for the selection and acquisition, provided no part can be used for administrative staffing costs, aka city staff costs. And I can tell you no staff time has been charged to the art project. So responsibilities of the Arts Commission themselves. So annually, and this is quoted directly out of code. Again, the bold is added, but to emphasize it, but the words are straight out of code. Annually, the Arts Commission shall make recommendations to the City Council that reflect short and long-range planning for the incorporation of art and sites regarding the appropriation of 2% for the arts funds. We did go back to at least the beginning of the PAC construction. We can find no records that these reports have ever been made, so there is no documents that would address this. Within that, and the next section of code does require specific requirements for the Arts Commission to report on. It requires annual recommendations of art project responsive to developing public arts needs in the community, so this is a broad statement. It requires annual recommendations for the incorporation of art reflecting the scope, scale, and character of the sites, tied into the first bullet. And it requires recommendations for incorporation of art projects as part of parks construction and building developments. Again, we can find no recommendations were ever made by the Arts Commission to council as part of an annual report to actually address this section. But that is the limit and the extent of the responsibilities of the Arts Commission. There is a cross-reference in the bottom of it to Chapter 2.50 in City Code. Chapter 2.50 is specifically outlining the responsibilities of the Arts Commission as their duties and responsibilities. Within subsection 4, it is the closest thing that actually talks about installation of art as part of their responsibilities, and it is to post-installment advise the City Council and staff on receipt of purchase of works for art. So there is an obligation for the Arts Commission to report back to council once art has been installed. Again, going back through council records, we cannot find confirmation of this report ever been done for the PAC and or any of the other arts projects. So past art projects that the city has used this for, this fund with, include the Performing Arts and Event Center, the Community Center, Celebration Park, Town Square Park, and as everyone walked under this morning or this afternoon, whenever you get to City Hall in the front lobby. What is important to note is there's, and I didn't quote them in this, but there are some specific carve-outs for projects that are in the right-of-way and projects that are non-building. So the majority of the projects that come to council for approval are effectively streets projects and/or swim projects. These requirements in the section are not triggered for those standard types of projects for road improvements or overlays or pedestrian improvements or traffic signals or any of the more common projects that council's used to seeing. So it also, parks maintenance projects don't typically trigger this. They're not financially large enough to trigger a requirement to associate with this project. So the majority of the projects that council see, this section of code is not actually triggered. So of all the city past projects, those 5 projects are the ones that have triggered it and have complied. There is some, when Dumas Bay Center was redone in the late 90s, that was viewed as a project for the arts in and of itself. So the council at that time actually said the entire project was an art project. So that's not, there's not a standalone art project that was done as part of the theater renovations. Although there is a lot of art down there, though, that has been included in that building. So the couple of things I will point out is with these projects, there is no requirement, and the code sections that you've seen are the code sections out of code that cover this. There is no requirements that this be a standalone project that's done by an outside commission artist. The majority of the projects that you see on that list were done as part of the design team efforts. So for example, the Town Square Park project, so the Performing Arts Center, we're going to focus on that a lot. So I'm going to skip past that one to the second most recent one, which is Town Square Park. The art project that was done in there is the sculptures that are part of the spray park. They were designed as an enhancement by the architect and, and separately cataloged and costed out, but they were constructed by the GC and the general contractor as part of that project. That is fully compliant with this code. There is no requirement that this be a standalone project or a separate process from the project, just that there is an artist involved that is funded as a proportional share of this project. So the majority of the projects that the city has completed, that is how they were completed. The PAC, like I said, was a separate process, and that is the only one where we've kind of, as a city, have developed a separate process and really a more enhanced process that has a significantly larger and more public effort associated with it. And the operations and maintenance facility to date has followed that same process. So digging that in, the last thing I will say is the Performing Arts and Event Center effectively skews this percentage down, but the past art projects, the design team have typically incorporated 40 to 100% of the cost of the 2% for the artists. And the rest of that has been the separate call for projects. So this is digging into the Performing Arts and Event Center a little bit more. This is copied directly out of the artist selection process that was in the Statement of Qualifications that was publicized and advertised. And this is that little bit more enhanced process that I was speaking about. So as part of that project, instead of it being part of the regular call for the project itself proper, the city elected to do something that was, like I said, a little bit more enhanced. So what we did was and again, this is copied directly out of the call for artists. We went out and sought qualifications from artists at large, and then we developed a public advisory committee. The public advisory committee involved 2 members of the Arts Commission, 1 member of the Youth Commission, 1 from the Federal Way Arts Coalition, and 6 staff members. That committee narrowed it down to 4 finalists that the city paid a $2,000 stipend to each of the finalists. They presented a proposal. Then those proposed, that same committee reconvened, made a recommendation, and the council ultimately selected the artist. At that same meeting, there were many additional public comments that were made by both members of the community at large that saw the presentations, as well as Arts Commission members that did get up and speak for their personal interest, or their personal, feedback to the council. For the operations and maintenance facility, this is going to look very familiar with the feedback, though, that we got from the Performing Arts Center, that we, from the artists specifically, that we had too many finalists. So we did reduce it from 4 to 3. Other than that, this is the same process that you saw before. And like I said, that feedback was from the artists, that they, if they're going to invest this level of time and effort, did not want to have that many finalists. So what you have in front of you is the public project summary for the completed Performing Arts and Events Center. The overall Hyla-Bose Harmonics art installation consists of a combination of elements completed by the project design team led by Element Architecture with an enhanced outdoor public gathering space, basalt-lined planter that can be viewed from both sides of a glass curtain wall dividing the inside and outside. The two sides of the glass wall are bridged by an additional artwork led by RDG Dahlquist Art Studio of Iowa. The RDG Dahlquist contribution consists of tile-lined columns and placed basalt within the planter. The tile patterning was inspired by bird songs collected from the West Hyla-Bose Boardwalk. So again, it's a partnership. For the PAC, about 48% of the total project budget was incorporated within the design team's budget, and the remainder was the RDG Dahlquist portion. So just to break down what that distribution of work looked like a little bit, the design team was responsible for the project management, coordination, integration of the artwork itself, the basalt-lined planter, including the drainage and planter soil, all of the irrigation systems and the connections to the control systems, the lighting controls, the low voltage and the wiring, and as well as the art plaques that are out there today. The artist contribution consisted of the design management and drawings of the actual artwork, the tile columns, the basalt that's inside the planter. So there's individual basalt rocks that are inside that's not part of the planter wall itself, as well as the actual landscaping light fixtures, or and light fixtures. So you can see that breakdown. So the operations and maintenance facility, there is a similar breakdown between the design team and the artist. So the design team is responsible, again, for all the project management coordination. The enhanced wall for the art backdrop, that is a picture that you see on your screen. That is a cedar plank wall that is not painted in this picture. It needs to cure, but will be painted before the project is done. Irrigation, lighting, control, and wiring, as well as all the art plaques. The artist, as it's envisioned right now, is responsible for the art design itself, an unknown art project, and the landscaping and light fixtures as the artist determines they're needed. So the funding amount itself, so how the funding is computed is outlined in code. It is the base value of the contract awarded for construction multiplied by 2%. It does not include the acquisition of real estate, the acquisition of equipment, or demolition costs. So preliminarily, staff went through the process of doing that and took the contract value that was awarded to Core Bank and used that as the starting point. 2% times that value. It was reduced by, and all of these numbers, to be very clear, are in your packet in the appendix. There's, this is all lined out. It was reduced by the delta between the cost of what was required as a metal wall and the art wall. So the art wall itself is actually more expensive than what was reduced from the art budget, to be very clear. The costs associated with a portion that would have been required to be a metal wall, the costs associated with the section that's a retaining wall, and the cost where it's a common building wall were not contributed towards the artwork. Those were taken out as project costs, so the effectively that increases the amount of the budget for the art. What we did then was confirmed that that number fit inside the original budget that was approved by council. So that resultant budget for the stipends and the call for the artists was $244,596. We then, following what was done for the Performing Arts Center, we went and presented it to the Arts Commission, and we received some feedback. And the part of the feedback was around the budget. So we said we should probably make sure we have this 100% right, and we have calculated everything correctly. So what we did is we went back and we reconfirmed that we were using the right numbers. We actually increased the starting value to make it inclusive of the change order that had been previously executed. So the starting value for this entire conversation went up. And then what we also found was we had included demolition of the existing facility, a list of equipment that's included on your screen that should not have been in the original budget. So when we reran the numbers with the updated information, the new budget inclusive of the 3 stipends is $174,998. So, council involvement. Taking a tangent to this conversation for a second, in November of 2023, I'm pretty sure everyone in this room is very well aware that we had a very large break-in at the existing city facility. We lost several $100,000 of equipment, as well as damages to the facility itself. And when we came to council, the feedback for the council was, in summary, make sure that the new facility is designed to prevent this from ever happening again. There was no increase in budget associated with that directive, so we effectively had to get creative. In April of 2024, we came back through LUTC for the 85% authorization to bid. We explicitly discussed the increase in perimeter security and the conversion of that metal wall to a concrete wall that could both serve as an art canvas as well as increase security to address some of the concerns that were brought up. We were also throughout, every time this came to council, when I stood here or my deputy director, Winkler, stood here, the first question we received from council was, what can you cut? What can be value engineered to reduce the cost of this project? So, to be candid, we followed the same process as what was done for the PAC in the past, which was an enhanced project and did distribute a portion of the project and associated with the artwork to the design team to design an enhanced security as well as incorporate art directly into the design in the wall. Very similar to the wall at the PAC that used a portion of the budget. And we did that to address the concerns from council without coming back to ask for additional money to also meet the directives that we received from council to increase security at this facility. So we have value engineered this project substantially. The other thing I will throw out there is very limited opportunities to meet the requirements on this facility for publicly available art. So when we gave this direction to the design team, they identified 3 areas. The first area is the area that we've been talking about tonight, the area in front of the retaining wall. The second area is the grass area that's outside of the main building. That area is also the area that has the what by code is defined as significant trees that we're required to save. So effectively, we would have to make a choice between cutting down the trees that have significant value or putting an artwork there. The third option was to put it into the lobby, which is publicly accessible for limited hours of the day. That lobby got greatly reduced in size as part of the value engineering exercise we talked about earlier, to the point that it would have to be paintings or something on the wall. There is no room in that lobby for something freestanding. So from a procedural perspective, the reason this comes to council is not this code. Within the city's purchasing manual, there's a requirement that all projects that are over $20,000 or all contracts that are over $20,000 come to council. So within the confines of code, this is execution of policy that falls onto staff under the direction of the mayor, the way code is established today. So that is what's been advancing. However, the city's purchasing manual requires us to come to council for approval for contracts over 20,000. This we've done a million times over, and I know council is very familiar with this. So that is where ultimately, if we have multiple choices, which obviously we'll have 3 with this one at a minimum, that's where council's authority comes in to actually select the appropriate artist as council deems fit. The purchasing authority is not something that can be delegated to staff and or to anybody else by council. With that, the couple of key components I do want to emphasize that I've brought up a couple of times is the funding cannot be moved from the project without violating the conditions of our general obligation bond. As I just kind of mentioned, there's limited available locations on site that meet the requirements for art installation. We've been instructed to value engineer this project, and we are following the same process that was outlined for the PAC. And with that, I am happy to answer any questions.
Before we get to that, I want to make sure it's clear that Councilmember Tran, while he can't be on video, is listening, and to my understanding, can participate orally. With that, Council, do we have any questions? Councilmember McDaniel?
Yeah, could you go back one slide, please?
Sure. This one?
Yeah, so my main question that I was going to start with was going to be about the funding and then moving the money in. So you're saying that the bond that we have does not allow money to be moved anywhere but from what? A certain fund that it's put in right now, or what exactly that means?
So there's 2 sets of requirements, and yes, it means exactly that. So within the bond documents, we are required to, and it's the exact name is actually in the memo that went to council as part of the packet. Let's see if I can find it quickly. But it is a project-specific account that we are required to maintain separately specifically for purchases and costs associated with this project.
So when we go out and we do bonds apparently that go against ordinances that we've written. Is that pretty much a standard bond policy, is that money does not allow to transfer out?
So it does not go, to be very clear, it does not go against policy. So the policy says that it can transfer if it's compliant with the bond documents.
That's not what it says in the ordinance I'm looking at.
Well, that's what's in city code. That's what was on the screen. So
Unless I have an incorrect one, it states that 2% of all total project costs funded by city monies to be set aside for transfer to the Art and Public Place Fund.
yes.
It doesn't say anything about it unless it goes against bond. Is that something that's?
It's elsewhere.
What was that, sir?
I'm not sure. We're looking for it here real quick.
Okay, no problem. Thank you. Yeah, I looked mostly at the attachments on that long memo you sent out. And if my understanding is correct, so we can get to an easier answer maybe, is currently the budget for the artist, which I believe started originally on Amendment 3, was $810,000, but after all reduction is now $174,998.
That's correct.
Okay.
So if you look at section 4.15.040-2, which if you are in the appendix, it's on effectively the second page of attachment 1. It says, in the case of a city project which involves the use of a general obligation bond proceeds, which is this one, to be very clear.
Okay.
Funds appropriated shall be used for projects and for capital purposes consistent with the authorizing resolution or ordinance approved by the city council and the voters. So when you look at the bond ordinance, it requires it to be in this project. So in the project account and used on the parcels. So we cannot use this for anything off-site. It has to be used on the parcels of the maintenance yard. So to answer your first question, we absolutely can do bonds that encompass multiple things. There's been a conversation for, in the past, to roll multiple, at the council retreat specifically, there was a conversation to roll multiple other things, unrelated to this project, but other things, into one common bond. We absolutely can do that, but that's something that has to be disclosed to the bonding bidders, because this is a contract, at the time that that's the desire of the city to do that. They look at that and determine what level of risk that is, and what, if the city were to default on the bond, what their ability to recollect it is. And then it changes the terms, the rates, the repayment, and everything else associated with it. So if we wanted to build what you're, I think getting at of doing something as a standalone art project that's not on this property or not associated with this project, we would have effectively needed to do a bond document that had two separate projects, one being the O&M facility and one being a standalone art project.
So is
But that's not what we did, and that's not what the bond
understood.
agencies bid
N-
on.
That wasn't where I was going with it. My
Okay.
question, trying to understand is, if the ordinance stated that we were supposed to put money aside that's supposed to be transferred in the fund, the understanding is the bond states you cannot transfer it into a separate fund, but it doesn't say don't put it aside. So we put it aside, but then when we put it aside, the monies that were put aside were then utilized to build the cement wall that has the artistic look and feel to it, correct?
I'm trying to make sure I understand your question.
I can say it again.
Yeah, if you
Okay,
don't
no problem.
mind.
So the ordinance, I'm not a big fan of laws, but I'm going to be strict when I'm up here on the laws. The ordinance states that money is to put aside and then transferred. The bond states you can't transfer it. It does not mean we can't put it aside. So my understanding is that money was put aside theoretically in an invisible box in the bond to be used for arts. But then the money that was put aside was utilized to build the wall, which now becomes a second question of, is the wall now classified as art?
Yes.
Okay, so the wall is now classified as art. And you're saying the bond holders do not like having non-tangible assets in case we fall back on the bonds. Is that what the understanding is? Okay, so that leads me into my second set of questions then is, who determines what's art?
Art is super subjective, to be
Understood.
fair.
For the city's purposes, is it, I don't understand the whole commission thing sometimes. It's still confusing to me. If we have an arts commission, are they then classified as being, I know that the recommendations, I know what the actual write-up says. Are they then to be determined to be the lead for the external city representation of what art is? Or is it in the end, the city, a member of the staff, actually has final say in what the definition of art is?
So it's not the art commission. So there is nowhere in the art and public, so I think, I guess to zoom out to a slightly more macro level, I think some of this conversation is getting to the fact that we're using the word art in multiple different contexts and multiple different terms. The fact that the term art is in the title of art in public places, which is the section of this thing, does not automatically construe responsibility to the Arts Commission. That if you want to have what you outlined, that is something that would need to be put into code for future projects. As it stands right now, the Arts Commission role is literally limited to recommendations for future.
Gotcha.
That's it. So there is no correlation between that and use of the funding. So what we have done is we have effectively elected to bring this to their attention, more or less following the same process that was used for the PAC. That was the first project that actually followed this process by all the records that the city has. What is done for art is, like you said, it's subjective.
Just I have one quick question. When was the
Yeah.
PAC built again?
2015, well, it broke ground in 2015, it finished in 2018.
So the ordinance was made in '94, and the first time we actually really played that game was in 15?
Actually, it opened in 2017,
17?
fall of 2017.
Gotcha.
Yeah, construction started in 2015.
Right.
No, so there are other past projects that also triggered this. However, on those past projects, the decision was made to effectively incorporate art as part of the design team. I wasn't involved in all the past ones, so I'm not sure I can give you explicit answers on every single one of those. But again, the other example I shared with you was Town Square Park, where that was 100% done by the design team. There was no involvement from the Arts Commission. There was no involvement from anybody else. beyond the design team saying we have to incorporate art, and everybody agreed that they did, and they did so successfully.
I think Councilor Adobe wants to just interject here for a second.
Maybe if I could jump in. I was involved in Celebration Park City Hall and the community center. And the Arts Commission, as I remember, helped choose artists. They all came with, there was like, I think 3, but they all came with concepts. And then the council made the decision. The Arts Commission had no other say really after that. And that's why we have the little things running out there with the logs going in it. There was 3 competing for it, and the council sat up here and decided that's the one we're gonna do. And at the community center, we have that person long jumping in the glass up on top. That
Yeah.
was one of the things that the council decided to do after the artist was chosen. And then the one at Celebration Park, I can't remember exactly. I think it had to do with
It's the
the little
sculpture.
statues, and Bob Keller brought the flagpole later, but I think it was the statues up on the humps.
It's the
So-
baseball bat specifically.
So it was
is what
really
I
the
know about.
council that made the decision what was going to happen, and it wasn't the art commission deciding. It was, they helped
Recommended.
go through the artists and selected it down, and then the council chose what, with the input on which one to go with.
Okay, I get that part.
Well, but I bring that up because I'm not sure why we're having this debate.
I think the main debate question is the concept that people thought 810,000 would be utilized for arts, and it's down to 174,000 now. So what's 174, 75,000. So I think that's the main reason we're having this conversation. Like I said,
So you would rather spend 874,000 than 174 for the fence?
no,
Is
I'd
that
rather
what we're
have,
talking about?
I'd rather have someone come straight up and tell me straight up that they're gonna use monies for the fence, a wall, not even a fence, than to have it go as saying it's gonna be for art, build a wall, and then say, oh, by the way, we'll give you a little something for the arts on the side. I mean, I'm not an arts person. I don't go, I don't check them out, but if you're gonna say you're gonna do something and the money's being said is being put aside for it, you need to do it. I'd rather you not have anything and just let it go, or else stick with what you say. That's my 2 cents on that part.
I just don't remember ever a number being said, what it was going to be. Maybe
2%, and then the math,
Yeah.
so. All right, I'll just pass it on then.
All right, Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. So I'd like to go back in history a little bit. When I got involved in the city, I was appointed to the Arts Commission during the construction of the community center. And as an arts commissioner, I came in after the artist was chosen, but we followed the art as it was being made, the tables that were being made, the artistic tables, and all the other art. And we had leftover money from that project, which I'm still not clear whatever happened to that. It was like $50,000. But the Arts Commission certainly did have a role in that, and certainly was involved in that, and I realized that the council made the final decision on who the artists were and what art was chosen. This ordinance that was created in 1994 was very far-thinking. When we became a city, we did not have a whole lot of public art. King County had pretty much, really done nothing down here in the south end. And that council was very smart and very creative to come up with 2% for the arts, because most cities have 0.5% or maybe 1%, but 2% was pretty unheard of. And so I applaud that council who was thinking ahead as to public art in the city of Federal Way in the future. And last year, when we were talking about the maintenance facility being built, I brought up the public art several times. I have served on public art committees for the school district twice, for the public libraries, both of our libraries, and at the community center as an arts commissioner. And this certainly isn't the way that public art was chosen for either the libraries or the school district. For the PAC, I remember very clearly that we had a committee, and I remember very clearly that the committee didn't agree on the public art.
That's Correct.
and that it came to the council for a vote, as it would have anyway. I remember being torn in two places, because generally, when public art is chosen, the committee has one voice, and they agree on the project. So this was very unusual that they didn't agree on the project at the PAC. I am disappointed that out of $810,000, less than $200,000 will be used for an artist to do something on the wall. I realize that we need security there, and public art doesn't have to be a statue, it doesn't have to be a painting, it doesn't have to be a mural, it can be functional public art. And I completely agree that we should be spending public art money on functional public art, which could be a bench, it could be a table, it could be whatever. But I'm disappointed that this is headed this way. I don't feel that this is in the, I don't think that the ordinance really thought that staff would be making the decision and not involving the Arts Commission or the council to make the decision. So I'm very disappointed about that, and I would hope perhaps in the future, we're going to have to look at this again and decide step by step how, as a city and a council, we want this to work. And I would also say, there is, one of your slides says that the Arts Commission, 4.15.070, annual recommendations for the incorporation of art projects as part of parks, construction, blah, 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 and conservation of artwork. When I was on the Arts Commission, we worked really hard with the city and the Parks Department to conserve the public art, because we realized that since we had become a city, the public art was not being conserved. And it was, some of it was falling apart, like the bat and the ball. I mean, it's still there.
Yep.
We have water features that were falling apart. And I have a video that Lori, I can't think of her last name, she was on the Arts Commission and a professional photographer, took a photo of every piece of public art. We cataloged it when I was on the Arts Commission. We went to the Parks Department and we tried to come up with a plan to work on conserving the public art, because we knew that we needed to, as a city, to do that. So I would have to disagree that this has never been done, that the Arts Commission has never done that, because we worked really hard to do that. Anyway, saying that, I'm just disappointed in the way that this has gone about, and I don't think it's in the sense that the ordinance was created. Thank you.
EJ, did you follow the ordinance to arrive at the 174 figure
We did. Yes.
by the letter of the law?
Correct.
Ryan, do you have you and I have spoken about it. Do you have any issue with the application of the city ordinance to the final number that came out?
No, everything EJ said is the letter of the law. So policy-wise, that's a different discussion. Legality-wise, we're completely solid.
So 174 is the floor. It's the
Well,
minimum.
let me caveat, I didn't do the math.
Right.
I looked at his math and it looked right.
All right.
But no, I didn't get a calculator out.
All right, sorry.
So may I clarify that?
Yeah, Councilman.
So 2% for art in public places, this was presented to the Arts Commission, $810,444. That was 2%. And of that, 566 was taken to incorporate into design, which is the wall, and then the rest is for some artists to come up with something to put on the wall.
Correct. So it was presented to the Arts Commission as 244, and based on the feedback that we received from there, after the Arts Commission meeting, we went back and recalculated everything, and there's things in there that should not have been included that reduced the amount to 174. So the correct amount that's available is 174.
So,
And effectively what that means is like the demolition of the existing building that should have been excluded was in there, because we looked at it from the context of the 2% from the base construction contract value fit within the approved budget of council. So when we went back and actually looked at it line by line and took out the things that should not have been in there, regardless of if it fits into the council approved budget or not, it further reduced it. So
So then-
174 is the actual number.
and this is incorrect, that what you presented to the Arts Commission?
This was done after the Arts Commission.
You look, that'd be like a,
There's two sheets, and I'm not sure which one you have in front of you. There's attachment 3 and attachment 4 in your packet. Attachment 3 is what was presented to the Arts Commission. Attachment 4 is what was calculated after the Arts Commission meeting.
All right, Councilmember Walsh?
My question would be, why did
this is
why was that
3,
800,000 number
this is 4. They
given
subtracted
to
that
begin
out.
with? I mean, why was there a mistake
And then,
there?
The 800 was not the number given. It was the 244 was the number given. So 800 is the amount if you multiply the entire contract by 2%. That is where the 810 comes from. The rest of the second half of the conversation is reducing out the art wall portion of it to get to the 244.
Okay, so initially it was going to be 244 then?
Correct.
Before,
That is correct.
before reading.
Which is what was on the SOQ that was included with the packet to the Arts Commission as well.
Okay, thank you.
All right, Councilmember McDaniel?
Yeah, one follow-up question. So the money between the 170, I'm just round up, 175 and the original 245 they thought were going to get after the wall was taken out, does that money just go back into the fund for the building then?
So yes, effectively. So I mean, there's a couple of things that are oddballs coming out. So 175 rounding to an even number
Yeah.
is effectively the floor of this conversation. If anything comes in under budget, the city effectively, and I may have to phone my friend Steve Groom over there. The city effectively has two choices. So one, we can return any remaining proceeds to the bond agency, and that'll effectively reduce the bond amount that we have. So this would fit that category. Or two, we can use it effectively to pay down year one. So, one has, if you, similar to a car payment, if you pay off just the principal, it lowers your long-term payment, but you still have to make the first year payment. Option two is you effectively use the money towards year one, but then you end up with interest over the remaining payment because you didn't pay down the principal as much. So that's really a financial decision to make once we get to the tail end of the project. And this is one of, hopefully there's other project savings throughout the entire project, that this would get rolled into that conversation holistically. The other piece of that is there's not a catch-all fund for this project. So, we've been hearing time and time again of recent from our contractor about the tariffs that are going into effect at the federal level that have an impact on this project, specifically all of the railings throughout the project. So there's some pretty large unknown cost increases right now. So any savings from any of the lines can automatically go right back into, assuming if we can keep it within council budget, that's one thing, or two, coming back to council requesting authority to shift money around if it's outside that previous approval to pay for cost increases that we have if there is savings on some other line. So those are effectively the options. But yeah, it would be applied to something. It doesn't just go away effectively.
No, I got it. And like you said, it's the bottom is 140, 175-ish.
Correct.
All right. Is there, just since we mentioned that, where are we at on the budget are we on budget, below
We are.
budget? I mean, we get the updates, but they don't always
We're on budget.
on budget.
Yeah, I mean, it's, we have two of the buildings in the air. I was actually, before I came in here, working on the council update for Friday that, obviously you guys will get on Friday if I get a chance to finish it. We're on budget. Two of the first two buildings are in the air. They're hopefully in the next 2 to 3 weeks starting foundations for some of the next large earthworks. From a percentage of completion perspective, we're still pretty early in this project. So there's a lot of uncertainty. There's a lot of unknown. That being said, I've built many projects, and I am very comfortable with where this project's tracking. We have a good contractor that's been good to work with, and we're in a good place. We're on budget. I would not say we're under budget, but we are on budget.
Okay. Last question. You mentioned percentage. Would you give a rough ballpark of what percentage of the project we're at now?
I'm
Completion.
happy to share that with you on Friday once I have it actually computed. I
Gotcha.
don't know off the top
Okay.
of my head, to be fair.
All right. I'll wait till Friday then.
Yeah, it'll be on that on Friday, but I don't know off the top of my head.
All right. Thanks.
Councilmember Honda?
Thank you. So if I understood what you just told Councilmember McDaniel, if there's any funding left over after the art's chosen, that it's just going to go into the general fund for this project? Is that what you just said?
No.
No, okay. What did you say?
It will stay within the project fund, so it does not come, I'm sorry, I might have misunderstood that. Not the general fund as in the city's general fund.
Right, but
which-
for the-
okay, yeah.
for the project.
So as I came out of my mouth, I think I realized that you were talking about the project specific. So yes, it would stay in the project fund, and then at the end, I mean, everything is categorized out separately. So it's not unrestricted money in the traditional sense of the general fund. But it stays in the account. Maybe that's a better way to say it than the fund. And then any savings across all of those individual accounts at the end of the project get rolled back to the bonding company.
So according to the ordinance, any unexpended 2% for the arts funds, which remain in the Art and Public Places Fund at the end of any budget year, shall not be transferred to the general fund or otherwise lapse, but said unexpended funds shall be carried forward from year to year until expended for the purposes set forth in the Arts for the Public Art, unless otherwise directed by the city council. So you can take whatever's, if anything's left, which I doubt it is, because there's hardly any money in it at this point, and you could actually use it for whatever you need for the project. Is that what I'm hearing?
No.
Okay.
No. So if we were to go out and at council's direction award an art contract for $150,000, then there would be the delta between the 150 and the 174 that would fall into the category that you're outlining. If the artist comes in, effectively, we have $174,000 for art available. The proposal as of right now is to make that entire budget available to the artists. So if the art project itself comes in under budget, we would have to run that to ground because we can't transfer it to the 2% for the arts fund without violating the bond. So the intent is to use the entire amount. But the delta, if I understand your question correctly, of the 174 to 224, that's not available fund to the art. The minimum art number is 174.
So if it's not spent on art, it could be spent on anything in the project.
Which number are you talking about?
The 174.
The 174 is proposed to be spent on art. So the only way it would not be is if council awarded a contract that when we get the actual artist proposals, that was less than 174. At that point, if council were to award a contract that's less than 174, we would need to go talk to the bonding company about what we would do with that delta, because we can't just transfer it without something with the bond company's approval.
Thank you.
All right, Councilmember Walsh.
Say if it came in at 160 instead of 174, and that's what we approved, you're saying that the $14,000 difference would not be able to be transferred to another fund.
That's correct.
However, since it could actually reduce the amount of if we were to put it back towards, like you say, that first payment and stuff like that, could we take that X number, 14,000 or whatever, out of the general fund and put it in the art budget, so that there's still, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I understand what you're saying. I'm not sure off the top of my head. I mean, certainly if the directive of the council at the mayor's purview is to transfer money from the general fund to the arts, that would be outside of this conversation, I think, holistically. In reality, I think the more practical thing to happen would be, if the chosen artist did come in at $160,000, to stick with your example, Councilmember Walsh, and there was a $14,000 delta there, I think we would probably recommend to the council that we go out and get an artist to do similar to the wraps that we put on the trash cans for on-site, or bringing in an artist to do some sort of bench or
Okay.
kind of some of the ideas that Councilmember Honda's thrown out. And I think our proposal would probably be to not open that can of worms and actually spend it on the project. It's kind of is envisioned by the ordinance.
Okay, yeah, yeah. I just want to make sure that the 2% is set
Yeah,
on the.
we need to work through that, but that's kind of my gut instinct is we wouldn't want to
Okay.
do that. We'd actually want to expend it and follow the ordinance.
Okay, sounds good.
Okay, are there any other questions? VJ? Okay, all right. Thank you, everybody. AJ, anything else?
No, sir.
Okay, all right. Thank you, everybody. That concludes the special meeting of the Federal City Council. We will resume at our regular city council meeting at 6:30. We're adjourned until then.